Hey everyone, Kiko Mabilog here. Thank you so much for joining me once again for another video. My name is Kiko Mabilog, as I mentioned, Mr. Workaholic, and I make videos about finance because I believe that every Filipino deserves to reach financial independence. My goal is to help as many people experience true freedom by building income systems and strategies that will help them live the life that they want. So let's jump straight into our topic for today. I want to talk about the 5 steps to financial comfort and give you a roadmap to build stability now and hopefully freedom later in the future as well. So, a little bit of backstory, a little bit about me if you're watching this video and you don't really know me yet. So, I'm an entrepreneur with multiple businesses. Me and my wife, we built a couple of ventures, including a marketing agency, some property rentals, and a coaching business, which recently just got acquired. News for another day. We have built our net worth to about 8 figures at 35 years old, 8 figures in pesos. Hit Coast FI, Financial Independence. If you want to learn more about that, I've got videos about Coast Financial Independence all across my channel. And we're on track to retire in our 50s. And I also love Lord of the Rings and the San Antonio Spurs. So, with that out of the way, now you know a little bit of who I am. Let's go straight into the 5 steps. So, the 5 steps essentially, this is something that I've built over time. I have to admit that this is not my, uh, my framework, so to speak. This is something loosely based off um, a framework that another finance creator and educator, a good friend of mine as well, Randall Chongson. Shout out to user Randall. So these steps essentially are based off his 5 steps to known as his personal finance, kind of like contextualize a little bit more just so that we can really get a deeper understanding. So, the reason why I share these 5 steps essentially is because I believe that if you really want to get your finances right, you need a strategy and you need a system. Strategy and system, they're quite different from one another, but there's a bit of overlap here and there. So strategy essentially is that's what you do to reach a certain goal, right? And your strategy is if you want to think about it, if you're playing basketball essentially, that's how you shoot your 3 pointer, that's how you make layups, that's the place that your coach will drop for you. A system, however, is a bit deeper than a strategy, and a system essentially is, your framework. It's what guides your strategy. And so you have the right strategy, but if you have the wrong system, then you're probably still going to achieve a couple of things, but you might not find it as easy, or sometimes you might not hit your goals, in the way that you want it to. You might miss a couple of goals, or it might take you a bit longer, and you might need to put out a bit more effort. So these steps essentially, I want to think of them as a system. And so if you follow the system, essentially, of course, no promises made, but if you follow it, then you're gonna be in a better position to reach financial comfort. So what are the 5 steps? Number one is to raise income. Number two is to build a buffer. Number three is to reduce your debt. Number four is to protect your income. Number five is to invest for freedom. So let's go through the steps one by one. The first step is to build your income engine. So to build your income. And your goal here essentially is to create stable cash flow so that the rest of your plan will be easier to execute. Let's face it, some people will say, oh, you can build financial independence and freedom and comfort also, which is more the topic of this video, if no matter what kind of income you have. But we just know for a fact that the more income that you have, the easier it is to build your income and your financial independence goals. Now, of course, that's not always the case because the problem of while your income increases, your lifestyle also inflates. But that's a topic for a different day. But let's just say, for example, and agree that if you increase your income and you do have the right disciplines, which hopefully the other steps will help you to do, that you will be in a better place and that it's going to be a whole lot easier for you, not completely easy, but a whole lot easier comparably if you had more resources to go on. So my rule of thumb essentially is to always shoot for, and this because this is the Filipino context, I'm making videos for Filipinos specifically because we have all of these finance creators teaching finance in the US, UK, but there's just not enough in the Philippines giving enough context for a full picture. So in the context of the Philippines, my rule of thumb is normally to try and shoot for 100,000 pesos a month. Now, that might change depending on where you are. Maybe you're in Metro Manila, maybe you're in the province, but I think that that's a good place to start. And you can kind of like uh, customize and personalize based on your specific scenario. But I think like for a family of, four, maybe three, four, maximum five, I think 100,000 is a good place to start. Six digits, six figures. Now, if you do have 100,000 pesos a month, what you want to do is you want to be able to break that down into three different buckets. And I know that this might kind of overlap with step number two, which is building your savings, but it is a very important point to make. So the three buckets first is number one is you have your core living expenses, which are your needs. And then next is your giving, investing, and saving, which is the 20% that you want to set aside for that. And then the third is your lifestyle or your wants, essentially, which is your fun bucket for your money, which is 30%. So this is based on the 50-30-20 rule. I know sometimes when you hear this as a Filipino, you're like, are you kidding me? I can barely save 10%. That's because we don't have enough income. And so I think that a lot of times we have to break through that barrier first of like increasing your income, whether it's building multiple sources of income, trying to find a higher paying skill, and upskilling and upgrading so that you can charge more, or you can get a higher paying job, whatever strategy that might be. I have a bunch of videos. I'll probably link some in the description to help you to get to 100,000 pesos a month, with the right principles, the right strategies. And I mean, of course, this is just such a wide topic. It really depends on what industry you're part of, what kind of background you have, educational, where you're located in the Philippines. Do you want to make income online, or do you want to get a brick and mortar job? But the rule of thumb essentially is to build your income to at least 100,000 pesos a month. Right now in the Philippines, getting 100,000 pesos a month actually puts you in a very high income bracket. I think that I don't have the numbers in front of me, but as far as I can recall, it puts you at the very least within the 80th percentile. So that means that you're actually more, well off compared to 80% of other people in the Philippines. But again, my hope and prayer is that more people will actually increase their income, so that in some way or another we want to decrease that number, meaning we want more Filipinos to actually make more money. So that's the first step, to increase your income, whatever means that might be, whether through upskilling, building side businesses, probably even creating your 5 to 9. So you have your 9 to 5, and then your 5 to 9, your next venture, so that you can increase your income. The next step after you've built your income is to create an emergency runway. And that's your buffer. What it is essentially, it's money that prevents panic and protects long-term investments. So a lot of people normally ask, uh, where should I invest, or can I invest? But I think the more important question that you should ask before you ask that question is, do you have a buffer? Do you have an emergency runway? And normally, when we talk about emergency runways, you need anywhere between 6 to 12 months. Some people say 3 months should be fine. I mean, it really depends, but I mean, the more the merrier, right? But there will be a cap to that, which I'll get to in a little bit. But the formula essentially for an emergency fund is your core expenses that I mentioned, the needs, multiplied by 6 to 12 months. Now, for example, if we go back to like the 50 to 60K a month, let's just say 60K to put a bit more, buffer for, miscellaneous expenses here and there. But let's say, for example, you want to shoot for 60,000 pesos per month as a core expense plus a bit of buffer, then you need at least 360,000 pesos if you want to reach 6 months of runway. If you need 9 months of runway, then you need at least 540,000 pesos. If you need 12 months, then you need at least 720,000 pesos. Where do you keep it? Ideally, you keep it in high liquidity options, like high yield savings accounts, time deposits in a bank, short term, low risk accounts. Just make sure that it's easy to access, because you want to make sure that if you have an emergency, you're not locked in. So a good example for that is, should I put my emergency fund in a time deposit that's at least like 5 years. Obviously, if you have if that's an emergency fund, you don't want that to happen. I normally suggest that actually for a bank, not time deposit. I know I mentioned time deposit earlier as an example. Scratch that. I actually meant UITF. So that's like the what we've actually decided to do is we put it into UITF, which is like an investment fund that's a bit lower in terms of the returns, but lower in the risk as well. So we put 50% of our emergency funds into a UITF within our bank, which we can withdraw anytime, and then the other 50% is just cash. It's just cash that we just keep in our bank accounts for us to be able to access in case we need it. Thankfully, we haven't needed it yet, but always the concept of emergency runways is you would always want to have it but not need it than to need it but not have it. And so that's the second step essentially for you. You want to build an emergency runway. So if you've built up your income and then you can start saving a little bit, this should be one of your first goals, which is to increase your runway. Now, I mentioned earlier that, yes, more the merrier, but you also don't want to put a cap to that. Why? Because anything beyond 12 months, essentially, in emergency runway, if you're just keeping it in uh in a liquid bank account, or if you're putting it a lower risk, lower yield, um, you know, um, account, investment account, then you're not really maximizing your money, which will lead us to step five later on. But I think it's a very important thought for us to remember that 12 months is kind of like where you want to cap your emergency fund. Of course, some people will kind of argue that, more liquidity is better. But like again, it really depends on you. I mean, experts will tell you, and the standard essentially is normally to go for anywhere between 6 to 12 months. And after that, essentially, you can do more with your money, which we'll get to in a little bit. The next one is to keep your debt healthy, which is where I want to talk about this very important concept called debt to income ratio. So what is debt to income ratio? It's basically your total monthly debt payments divided by your gross monthly income. So going back to that 100,000 pesos um, example or benchmark that we talked about earlier in this video, if you're making 100,000 pesos and you have debt, essentially, if you put all of your debt together and you're paying about 15,000 pesos in debt, uh, monthly payments, so that could include consumer debt like credit cards, or probably like car payments, mortgages on your house. Those kinds of debts, when you put them together, there has to be a healthy debt to income ratio. So what's the healthy and ideal debt to income ratio? So ideally, you want your debt to income ratio to be anywhere around 20%. That's ideal. Of course, we understand that you still need some debt to acquire certain things, right? And so like and this philosophy can change again for many people, but like our rule of thumb with my wife is sometimes we like to leverage debt, especially if we know that it's going to bring us more income. So a good example of that, for example, is we've invested in a couple of investment properties, and those are generating revenue for us, but they're on mortgages. But we want to make sure that we're trying to shoot for that ideal debt to income ratio. Thankfully, we are within the ideal DTI, and so that really helps us out a lot. If you're probably asking, okay, so I might need more debt, your upper limit should be 30%. So if we're going back to that 100,000 pesos a month example, your ideal DTI is about 20,000 a month, and your upper limit should be around 13,000 pesos a month. Now, not all of that should be consumer debt, by the way. Consumer debt meaning cards and personal loans. You want to make sure that consumer debt in like should be at the very most 10%, because that's just debt that ideally shouldn't even be there. I mean, of course, ideally it should be zero, right? But I mean, I understand, of course, that sometimes there's a bit of splurging that needs to happen, and when that happens, you want to make sure that it's not beyond 10%. So, important question there is, Kiko, I have more debt than that. What is my strategy? If your debt payments are too high, then investing becomes fragile. So, my friend, if you have more debt than this and you want to invest, my my take there, and a lot of like what the experts will really say essentially, is it's better for you not to think about investing first, but you need to start paying down your debt until you get into that healthy 30% or below, ideally 20% DTI. You want to reduce high cost debt first, starting with the high interest debt. So normally that would be your consumer debt, which is also the reason why you don't want consumer debt to take too much of a portion of all of your debt, because normally the interest rates are just crazy. If it's on a credit card, you're probably paying like 1 to 3% of that, which will come out to about 12 to 36%. So if your debt essentially is like 30,000 and your interest is at around 20%, then you're losing 6,000 pesos every single year to that debt, and it just keeps going up and it keeps compounding if you don't pay it off. So that's the third step. The fourth step is to protect the machine. And the machine essentially is you. You're the income machine. So you create the income, and you also want to make sure that you're healthy as well. The best way for you to protect your health is to stay healthy. But that's a topic for a different day. But the goal here essentially is to ensure that one event, catastrophic event, does not wipe out years of progress. So a core protection stack basically that could work for you if you want to protect your money. Number one is you have to have an HMO, which is a health insurance. That's the first line. So always getting an HMO essentially that can help, pay off like, hospital bills for emergency for all members of your family. So if you have kids, then you know for a fact how expensive it can be to when your kids get sick, and it's heartbreaking every single time I see, posts of people online not being able to pay their hospital bills because it's such a tragedy, right? I mean, it's so expensive to lose health, and so you want to make sure that you protect yourself from an emergency like that, because all of us will have will have certain problems with our health, some major, some minor, but we want to be ready for that. Number two is you want to have a term life insurance. So life insurance essentially is an insurance that protects your family if anything happens to you. The next one is critical illness. So this essentially covers any emergency where you might get critically ill, right? So cancer, heart disease, and anything that could be unforeseen, and even disability as well, accidents. And so having that cover can really help. So a life insurance is different from critical illness. So you want to keep that separate as much as possible. And lastly is you want to protect property as well, home, car, your business, because if anything happens to that and the expenses can blow up, it can really hurt your finances as well. So you want to be ready for situations like that. And then the last step, essentially step 5, is to invest so that you can buy freedom, where we talk about your portfolio target. So what you want to do essentially here in this step is you want to start thinking already about as far ahead in the future as you want. And normally we start talking about the concept of retirement here. And when we're investing, essentially, like a lot of people, the big misconception is, oh, I've invested 100,000 pesos, and that's a great win, by the way. But I hope that you don't stop there, because you actually need more than that. So how do you know how much to invest and what your target should be? You want to first choose the monthly income that you want later in life, and then compute your investment portfolio based on that. Don't guess. You need to pick a number and plan to reach it. So example, if you want to make 60,000 per month as a target when you retire, then what that basically means essentially is that you need at least about 45,000 in monthly passive income from your investments on when you retire. Because let's say, I mean, truth of the matter is, average SSS is around 15,000 pesos, so you need 45,000 pesos more per month in income. And so that means that you need about 540,000 pesos. So there's this concept called the 4% withdrawal rule, which I don't have the time to explain anymore. But I'll link another video essentially where I talk about retirement in a deeper dive. But according to that rule, essentially, your portfolio should be about 13.5 million pesos, which seems like a lot of money. But I really encourage you to check that video out, because you'll be surprised just how doable it actually is sometimes to reach, your freedom number. Some actionable steps over the next 5 days, sorry, not 7 days, but like 5 days essentially, or probably even less if you're really determined. Then this is what it would look like. Day one, you want to list down your core expenses, set your emergency fund target. So anywhere between 360 to 720,000 pesos. If your income is 100,000, your core expenses is 50. Then next is you want to calculate your DTI and aim for, at the very ideal setting, 20,000 per month if you're making 100,000. So if not, then multiply it by 20%, maximum 30%. Number three is to check your protection gaps and see, have I covered the bare essentials: HMO, term life insurance, critical illness, so on and so forth. Number four is to set automatic transfers for your emergency fund and your investment accounts, that 20% that we mentioned earlier. So if you set that aside and you kind of like break it apart, maybe like if you're starting with your emergency fund, you could probably put it all into emergency first until you hit that 6 months like in uh, emergency fund target, that buffer. And then number five, after you have set that emergency fund and you already have a target in mind, then you can start to compute your freedom number. Hopefully, this was a helpful video. And if you found it helpful, then please do subscribe to this channel, check out my other videos, share it with a friend who might benefit from this. And yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll keep on like churning out these content because I really want to help more Filipinos experience financial independence so that they can live the life that they want to live. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time around. Bye.